大家好，我是小镇小民。我现在呢，每周三讲好了，跟这个媒体人士 Alexander Mercurius，我们会聊一下一周发生的情况。主要就是说，我想听听他对一些事物的看法，我觉得挺受启发的。然后呢，我们聊的比较多，每一次都有90分钟。那么你要是想看整个的那个采访呢，就在我的英文频道。但是呢，我觉得有的时候它里面有一些讲的挺不错的，挺有意思的呢，我就摘出来一些。放上中文字幕跟大家分享一下。今天这一段就是说了一下阿桑奇的事情，因为他比较了解，他有朋友，律师朋友有跟踪这件事情，还专门到法庭上去听这个案例，所以呢，我就说让他给讲讲清楚。还有呢，就是因为跟阿桑奇这件事情嘛，我们也就想到了里拉，因为我也认识，然后他也认识里拉，他又说了一些里拉死之前的一些细节，我觉得也挺有意思的。再有就是纳瓦尼了，就是说他的这种各种各样的死因吧，所以呢，就是这一些呢，我就想跟我放了字幕跟大家分享一下。好，谢谢。
So let's start with the Julian Assange. What's the latest? What can you tell us?
Yeah, I have two friends who are attending the hearing at the moment. One of them, who is a reporter from a German media outlet, he's actually physically in the courtroom and he's keeping me updated. Yesterday, Assange's lawyers presented his case. Everybody agrees, everybody, when I mean by everybody, all the people who understand these things, agree that he should win. The legal arguments in his favor appear to be overwhelming. And the view of most of the people who were there is that the judges seemed to be in agreement and they were nodding their heads and appearing to show signs of approval. The problem is, we've been in this situation before with this case where it looks as if there really isn't any argument, and it's impossible to imagine that the court can come to a decision that is against him, and then the court just does. So we can't be certain. I'm also getting reports today. It's the American side that's putting their case, and apparently it's completely unconvincing, and it has obvious holes, and the judges are apparently asking some very searching questions. But as I said, I've learned from bitter experience to assume nothing. So we'll have to wait and see. We'll possibly get a decision today, but the full reasons for the decision will take some, we'll have to wait for them for several days. And it is not impossible that the court will delay giving its final order and its final decision for some time. So we may know where it's going by this evening, but then again, we might not. It's all very terrible. And I should say he apparently is extremely ill. He couldn't face attending the hearing, even by video link. He was offered a video link. I mean, he's in a terrible state. And again, the cruelty of this whole affair is just off the scale.
Yeah, the problem with this case is really not a legal case, right? It's a very political. Well,
Well, you've just, can I just interrupt, because that's
yeah,
exactly the point that his lawyers were making yesterday.
okay.
This is a political case. It's been a political case all along, and the legal principle always, in theory, followed by Britain, by England, going all the way back to the 18th century, is that England does not extradite people in political cases who've been charged with political crimes. And there was case after case after case that the lawyers were able to cite in which this principle was clearly and fully set out. And the judges were absolutely nodding and in agreement about this. There's also another factor, which I wasn't aware of until yesterday, which is that, of course, England also has a policy of not extraditing people to countries where they might be executed, even
Mm-hmm.
criminals.
Mm-hmm.
And the point is that the United States has given assurances that if Assange is extradited to the United States, he will only, if convicted there, face humane prison conditions. But the Americans were very careful not to say that he might not be executed. He might be executed. They could expand the charges against him, include charges of about terrorism and things of that kind, which carry the death penalty. And he might, if convicted, be executed on these charges. And the Americans are given no promise that they won't do that.
Yeah, and the whole thing, the death penalty in the US, I think, is very strange because it's not regarded as cruel and unusual. Death penalty is not regarded as cruel and unusual because the Constitution said you cannot punish people using cruel and unusual method, but US still has, death penalty. So that itself is very strange to me. And then since it is a political case, I actually find it's very strange that the Biden administration doing what they're doing, because they are not the one who indicted him. It was William Barr under Donald Trump who indicted Julian Assange. I don't know why the Biden administration doesn't use this to their advantage. Just drop the charges, and then he could be taking the high ground, saying, I'm the one who protect the First Amendment. Not only that, he could even say something like, you see, you guys think I'm senile, my brain is not functioning. But on this matter, I clearly have better judgment than Donald Trump, my opponent. Why don't they do something like that? Take advantage of the situation that Donald Trump is the one who indicted him. I actually think he can win some votes. I actually think he can. What do you think?
I think he could win lots and lots of votes. But the problem is, if he does that, he's going against the people in the United States who probably have the real power, who are the intelligence and security agencies. They are the people who have been driving this case. The first steps to prepare this case against Julian Assange were taken whilst Barack Obama was president. And it continued through the time when Donald Trump was president. And of course, it's continued through the time that Joe Biden is president. Now, it seems that Obama was queasy about the case. It seems that at one point, Donald Trump actually seriously considered granting a pardon to Assange. And of course, we don't know what is going on within the Biden administration. But in the case of Obama, it was impossible, apparently, to stop this legal machinery being put in place. And it appears that when Trump wanted to pardon Assange, he was warned that if he did that, various Republican senators would support Democratic moves to impeach him. So this is the problem. It's not what the American people think. It's what the people who hold and exercise real power in the United States want. Now, of course, if Joe Biden was a strong, clever man, he would nonetheless probably do what we say he should do. After all, what would the intelligence and security agencies do in that case? I mean, they're hardly likely to back Trump. But I don't get the sense that Joe Biden is a strong and intelligent man.
Yeah, you're right. The problem is, the security apparatus, they are the one in control. Yeah, that's just, a lot of the problem in the US, that's where it is. Yeah.
And then it is indeed. And can I just quickly add something? Because, this is an important point to make here, because this is a fundamental difference between the United States and China and Russia. Because in China and Russia, it is the political leadership that controls the intelligence and security services. In the United States, it is the other way around. And that is something that people in the United States and across the world need to understand. When people talk about the differences in the political systems between these various countries, that is one of the single most important political systems. So in China and Russia, you know who is in ultimate charge. In the United States, you don't.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, we don't know who. and then I mean, things we're talking about Assange, we have to talk about the Navalny's death, right? And the hypocrisy here is incredible. Now, Julian Assange is a political prisoner. That one of the things they really upset. Navalny is a political prisoner, but Julian Assange is a political prisoner. Nobody bothered by that. And then regarding his death, Joe Biden said something like, okay, I was not surprised, but very outraged by the reports of death of Alexei Navalny. And Kamala Harris said, let us be clear, Russia is responsible. That was like 15 minutes after the news came out that Navalny is dead. Now, none of them said a word when Gonzalo Lira, who is a U.S. citizen, was killed in the Ukrainian prison, isn't it? They care more about a Russian than they care more about a U.S. citizen, isn't it?
You are absolutely correct. I mean, I have nothing to add to the point that you have just made. I mean, just to say this, I mean, Navalny was a political opponent of the government in Russia. He was also someone, and by the way, here I have, I researched 10 years ago as I did a legal research on one of the cases that was brought against him, a fraud case involving a timber company, and for which he was serving part of his sentence for because he was convicted in that case. And I came to a view which was supported, by the way, by the commentaries and opinions of many eminent legal people in Britain, that had he been charged in England under the English Theft Act on the same facts, he would have been convicted. Just saying. Mm-hmm. So he's got a shady business history, and he's somebody who engaged in political activities against his government, in which he was quite open about the fact that he wanted to overthrow that government. And he engaged in activities in order to try to overthrow that government, which were illegal, like holding illegal protests on the main streets of Moscow, using mostly school children to block the traffic and things of that kind. So eventually he was sent to prison. Sooner or later, even if on the basis of his business activities alone, he would have found his way to prison, given the way in which he conducted his business activities. So we're talking about a complex man. I mean, I don't want to understate the tragedy of what happened to him, but a complex man who made decisions which one can see why they led him to where he ended up. With Julian Assange, you're talking about somebody who was a journalist, who conducted journalistic activity, who has committed no crime in Britain, and who acted in a way which in the United States has traditionally been protected under the First Amendment of the Constitution. So impossible for me to see how this kind of case could have been brought against him. And if you research the case carefully, you see very clearly that it is full of holes.
And in terms of Navalny's death, of course, there's a lot of conspiracy theory, and also in China as well. Now, I personally think he died of natural causes because he had, seems like he had underlying health issues in the past, right? And but if he were murdered, I would, lots of people in China, and I would agree is that, who has the motive to really do that? Yeah. The fact is, his death diverted the attention from Avdiivka's retreat. Yeah. Neutralized Tucker Carlson's interview, who I do think gave Putin a little bump, right? Mm. And then, of course, Biden wastes no time to using this as another reason to push for his 60 billion that he wants to give to Ukraine, etc. So it seems to me like the West has a lot more incentives. At this point of time, a dead Navalny seems much more useful than an imprisoned Navalny that nobody pays attention to, don't you think?
Well, absolutely. Let's first of all unpack what you just said, because let's begin with Navalny's health conditions. There's no doubt about them. They were extensive, and they by themselves might provide a complete explanation for his death. Now, you brought up the case of Gonzalo Lira, who I knew well. He was a friend of mine. I ought to explain to your viewers that I had that connection with Gonzalo Lira. Now, he also had a health condition. We actually know an awful lot about the conditions in which Gonzalo Lira was held in Ukraine. And all the information that we have is that the Ukrainian authorities, who also brought a completely phony case against him, deliberately mistreated him, and that he was in fact physically abused by other prisoners in the prison where he was held at the instigation of the Ukrainian authorities, who wanted to kill him. And we also know that a very important and powerful lawyer from Switzerland had been sent to investigate his case just before Gonzalo died, by one of the major agencies that is concerned about the conditions of prisoners. So he died just before that investigation into his conditions could be carried out by that lawyer. So you have a very much clearer case about Gonzalo than you do about Assange. The facts are very much stronger about Gonzalo, and you are absolutely correct in pointing out that he was an American citizen exercising his rights under the First Amendment of the Constitution. He was doing YouTube videos from Ukraine, but they were in English, and they were being broadcast to an American audience primarily. And of course, he was not engaged in espionage, those kind of activities, or the kind of political activities that Navalny was engaged in. There's a very, very strong case there. So that's the first thing to say. You're absolutely correct. There is good reason to think that this might have been a death by natural causes. The second point to make is you're equally correct in saying that there is no conceivable or logical or possible or plausible incentive for Vladimir Putin and the officials around him to have murdered Navalny now. Navalny's popularity in Russia collapsed a long time ago. It went into even further decline after the conflict in Ukraine started, because most Russians assume that he is an American stooge. Some believe, many believe that he's a CIA asset. I don't know whether or not that is true or whatever. So there is no conceivable sense in which he posed any kind of threat today to the Russian government. And moreover, you're also absolutely correct in saying that the timing from President Putin's point of view looks extremely strange. He's just won a big victory. His army's just won a big victory in Avdiivka. He's just had a very interesting and successful interview with Tucker Carlson. He's politically doing very well. Why would he want at this point in time to remind everybody about Navalny and, have stories spread around about the fact that, he's actually this cold-blooded murderer who kills people like Navalny? It doesn't make any sort of sense. Now, about whether the Western powers murdered Navalny, I don't know. I mean, it would be rather concerning if they have an ability to reach out and organize a murder in a Russian prison beyond the Arctic Circle. But it does say that Navalny did have a meeting with his lawyer a couple of days before. Maybe the lawyer gave him some medication. Maybe that medication was planted. Maybe all kinds of things happened. I don't know. I don't know anything about this. But if you are looking purely at motive, Putin has none. As you correctly say, the Western powers have actually quite a lot. I mean, he was no longer serving their purposes in a Russian prison. The political capital that he had in Russia had been completely spent. So, you want to distract attention from Tucker Carlson's interview, from the fact that the war in Ukraine is going disastrously wrong, from the president's own problems, his mental health issues and all that. Well, you know, let's say put it like this. If a case like the death of Navalny comes along, it fits in rather well with your narrative agenda. That's all I'm going to say about this, because I don't want to point fingers when I have absolutely no evidence at all.
Yeah. So it actually serves, I actually think it serves Russian best interest to get to the bottom of this. Actually, I do think they do need to do an investigation. What happened, right?
Yes.
Is it really natural cause, or he was murdered? I mean,
So I mean, there are other possibilities. I mean, one is suicide. I mean, I think you know nobody's talking about this, but he has had a history of depression apparently. And, you know, he has all the drugs and all kinds of things. So it's not impossible that, you know, being marooned in the Arctic Circle, he thinks he's this great revolutionary leader. But of course, he's not. The revolution that perhaps he thought would come hasn't come. He's faced 30 years in prison. It's understandable he might feel depressed. And, you know, I don't, again, want to speculate too much. But, you know, people in that kind of condition can make these decisions. So that's one possibility. The other possibility, of course, and this isn't to be discounted either. I mean, I had friends of mine who were lawyers who represented people in prison. It's not impossible that some of the prisoners themselves in a prison, you know, became aggressive towards him. And that might have also contributed to this issue. And that might have happened without any instigation from the Russian authorities as well. But you're absolutely right. Proper investigation, full autopsy, people from outside being invited to review the results, from Switzerland, from India, from China. I mean, all of that would help.